and welcome to another episode of Go Your Way. I'm Greg Neerman, joined again by Phoebe Go. Phoebe, this is fantastic. I love all these episodes. I'm still tapping my toes to the intro song, so it hasn't gotten old yet.
Oh, I know. I'm going to make it my ringtone, I think, so that every time my phone rings, everybody will get it stuck in their head. That, I think, is my evil master plan. I won't have any friends left.
And speaking of getting things stuck in your head, this is an ongoing series around data protection, right? And this is the top priority for every CIO, CTO, and anybody that's working with data in most organizations. And one of the things I really kind of thrive on very deeply is the relationship that NetApp has with Google. And this has been an ongoing relationship, a very successful relationship, really successful integrations, particularly when we think about Windows migrations, we think about databases, the opportunities that have been created from this relationship goes really deep.
Yeah, I think Google, a lot of the time when I think about starting cloud native applications or thinking about an application, Google comes to mind. They're one of the big hyperscale, hyper mega. What's the word now? It's got to be bigger than hyperscaler now because there's just so much possibility there. And then obviously, along with all that cool innovation and the cool engineering of Google's infrastructure is also the risk of losing some of that data. So I think, these topics go hand in hand, right?
They sure do. And I'm going to introduce our very special guest. We've engaged with him before on past Go Your Way episodes. He's Dean Hildebrand, the technical director in the office of the CTO at Google. Dean, welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
And I got to remind everybody, I think we mentioned this on some earlier episodes. You were a contributor to the NFS protocol. So not to date you at all, but that's going to make you at least 75 years old.
Close to there. I like to dye my hair. So,
Well, you look great.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, me along with many other people, helped evolve it over the last 20 years. So, it's been a fun ride.
It's okay. The cloud makes you ageless now, right? That's the cool thing. It's kind of the new fountain of youth. I mean, NFS is still huge in cloud. So I suppose, it is timeless what you've contributed.
I mean, I like to say it's the never going away file system is more my NFS in the sense that, I think it can evolve and it can, adapt right to the new and elastic sort of resources that are available in the cloud. So,
yeah,
absolutely. And, we started off talking about the strength of the Google and NetApp relationship. And it's been something for a number of years here. We've worked together. And Dean, I know you personally have been intimate with this relationship between our organizations. Can we reflect for just a minute about what that looks like from your experience in the office of the CTO?
Yeah, I mean, I think, so I just started on working with NetApp almost 4 years ago now, when we were really just sort of kicking around the ideas of, we think enterprises are going to come to the cloud and we should be ready and develop, the right services to prepare. But I think we've always had the thinking that from day one, it wasn't just about, okay, how do we take what's on-prem and deliver it in cloud, right? It's more been about how do we really provide extra value and take, they want, customers want an evolution. They want to leverage benefits from both worlds, right? And so how do we really make it super easy for them and give them all the protections and security and, everything else that they're used to, but now in a whole new way that adds more extra flexibility and more options and, a wide range of services, right, that they can have at their fingertips.
And do you see, the relationship with Google and NetApp, I know is one that is deeply embedded. There's a lot of great engineering. Could you talk a little bit, just give us a sneak peek? What is it really like? Is it like engineers calling each other up on the weekends, or is it, well, hopefully not weekends, to do projects together, or is it something a little bit more formal than that? What's it look like?
Well, I guess I would start by saying, I think some of us maybe are getting a little, maybe even sick of video conferencing and whatnot, but over the last, 18 months of COVID. But I really have to say that video conferencing and being able to look face to face between all the engineers over the last 4 years has been just critical to building the relationships and getting together. We get together on the East Coast, we get together on the West Coast. We really, again, sort of try to build what we think is a singular style development team and project management team in terms of delivering that single experience to the user, and really trying to avoid any kind of organizational friction that might come up, right? And we're from the user's perspective on sort of getting caught between the two organizations, right? They really just want to have that singular experience, which is, again, like, for example, why we do L1 support for the CVS offerings, in terms of really trying to give that user to say, hey, look, you get all the great enterprise protections, and we make it look like as if we're one organization working together.
It really is a fantastic relationship, the integration work that we're working with both engineers. But let's take it a step level. The series is focused on data protection, and we think about the unique capabilities in the cloud and the value proposition just inherent with the cloud. But let's get really specific about that relationship with GCP and how it drives additional value for data protection.
Yeah, as I think we were talking before, right? I mean, I think if you take your on-prem workloads and you had, let's say, security problems, or you had data protection problems there, and you lift them into the cloud, I mean, in many ways will help in some aspects, but you're really just lifting and shifting your problems, right? And so really a part of the discussion that we have is around, okay, so let's first see if you had, what kind of issues you had in your workloads and your data protection strategy. And then let's adopt that to fix up the gaps where it needs to be done, and leverage all of the cloud native services as much as possible to basically just remove the burden of each and every customer to reinvent the wheel on how we can provide the best level of security. So it really is a full stack style approach around how do you protect your data, but also how do you build into your security policies. And so, that's something in cloud where, for example, like Chronicle Detect can help you detect, security threats right from the higher level. And then all the way when you get down to, actually storing the data and the data protection at that level, right, then relying on, in file storage for NetApp to, follow all of the best practices around how we can leverage the cloud infrastructure to make that happen is really key.
I really like that kind of piece of caring about the application or the workload as a whole, and not just kind of saying, well, I did my data protection piece, like,
right.
You manage the rest.
Exactly.
Because I think in the cloud,
I did it.
Right.
Don't look at me.
Right. And I think in the cloud that gets complicated because you have things in different locations, you'll have things running through different services. And so I think going back to that point about having a really tightly coupled relationship means that we can say, hey, these are ways that we can help do data protection with NetApp technologies. And here's the ways that Google does data protection. Let's make them all work better together. Speaking of integration of data protection services with Google and NetApp, I guess, what are you seeing your customers looking for when they're trying to build that workload in Google? What do they want from Google when they say, hey, protect my data, or how should I protect my data?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's I think, on what the industry over the last 20 years has done has really developed like a really sort of templated way of providing, you back up your data, maybe you mirror data within a metro area somewhere, and then you provide, let's say, a DR strategy to another site. And you might not even get a choice of what other site, because how many sites do many customers have to begin with? I think when they move to cloud, then it really becomes thinking back to the basics about, all right, what are you actually trying to protect against? Are you trying to do insider threats? Are you trying to protect against, attacks? Are you trying to just prevent, erosion of your data over time? tornadoes. I mean, it really sort of gets back down to that point. And then as well, it goes back to the availability aspects, right? And the whole RPO and RTO and how, I think the fundamentals of that apply just as much as they ever did on-prem into cloud. It's just that now how you achieve the right RPO and RTO and the availability of your services becomes, well, let's just say there's few more options to consider, right? In terms of all the different zones and regions that are available, but then all the different services and networking capabilities that you could sign up for. And then also the different types of data protection services from backup and DR. And, sometimes the naming and terminologies change a little. So then people, are confused on what's a snapshot. Is a snapshot something you put in the object store? Is it in, who knew that we had to talk about what a snapshot was all over again? So,
well, yeah, thanks to the ticket down below. I think it is. It does make it more complicated in some ways, but then, having options is also a good thing, that I can now have, the choice and make it as granular, as specific as I need my data protection to look. But I think there was a good comment that you brought up on the earlier call, which is kind of, is my storage ready? Is my infrastructure ready? Is my, are all those cloud services ready to run a production workload that has the right levels of data protection too?
Yeah, and I love it when users know what they're trying to protect against. Because asking someone, are you trying to protect against a hurricane? And they were like, I never thought about that. I'm like, so this seems like something you should think about, right? And they're like, well, I don't want to pay for it. I'm like, okay, fine, that's your choice. You don't want to pay for a hurricane, and if you're okay with like a data center, I don't know, a hurricane taking it out for, X period of time, like, that's okay. No one says there's a right way and a wrong way, but we're here to basically give you some really easy templated ways to make sure your data is safe, make sure that we protect against the types of threats that you're concerned about, because every organization has different concerns about, it might be okay to be down for an hour, or maybe an hour just lost you millions of dollars, right? And so now, you really don't want to go down for more than 30 seconds or something to that effect. And then how you layer that on top of, Google's amazing network, right? Which really allows you to flow the data to wherever you need to get it. And then all the different regions and zones, right? In terms of where do you want to protect your data? Are you trying to, survive a European outage and continue offering in the US, or vice versa, or Asia? So all of these different aspects, I think, sort of, the global infrastructure really brings up new ways that if you just had two data centers before, they just weren't on the table to even consider on how you would do these types of things.
And that's an excellent point, right? I mean, I think, it kind of roll the clock back 10 to 15 years ago, and the options that we had for data protection were kind of very tightly defined. And as we think about the extension of hybrid cloud into cloud native, and you brought up regions and zones, the variables are much more different. And it goes back to Phoebe's point about having more options, and just having more options make it more complicated. My perspective on that's always been that if you've got more options, you can do more scenario planning, which I think is Dean, the point that you're making, is that you've got very different scenarios. Those scenarios are going to be different for different organizations based on size, based on workloads, based on a number of different things. And now you've got I would, rather than complexity, I choose to look at flexibility. And one of the recurring themes I've had is the right tool for the right job at the right cost. And this is where the optimizations with NetApp and GCP really give you that flexibility of options.
I think that's exactly right. I mean, anytime you move into a new infrastructure, right, you move into something like Kubernetes, or you move into, even from bare metal to virtual machines, or maybe you're going the other way. It really is, our job and the job of this partnership to really make it simple and easy for customers to adopt. They want this new flexibility. They want how do I, custom build like sort of the type of data protection and security and data management and distribution and availability for my users. But they definitely don't want to struggle and spend years trying to get it right. And so, really, I think that has been an ultimate focus, is always to try to figure out how do we make all of this stuff really simple and easy to use, and I love looking at GKE as an example, because I always feel like they're sort of on the bleeding edge in terms of our Kubernetes service around, how do we just make things easy to deploy? And like, for example, the release of Auto GKE is really something where we said, oh, you don't even need to manage, the GKE, or what types of VMs you need to provision, or how your containers get distributed, just deploy them and things will start working, right? And we really need to get sort of data protection to that kind of thing as well. And I think we're a long ways down that path around just give us the data, let's set it up and make it useful for your organization, your applications, and then we can just take it, we can take it from there, right? And really make sure that you have all the extra protections, and that you don't have to worry so much about, because we're spending a lot of time worrying about that.
Right. And I think that as you were speaking, I was thinking about exactly that, how, with our relationship being able to automatically protect a workload that's running on, Cloud Volumes ONTAP, you can have backup turned on as a toggle, and then it's protected into, GCS sitting in a bucket, customer managed bucket that you can then tell people, I have another copy of this. It is safe. I mean, maybe it doesn't suit everybody. Maybe it's not for every workload. Maybe there is some custom tuning, but I think so many more customers appreciate having that automatic, almost peace of mind. I've got so many other things to worry about when I'm building a cloud infrastructure or a hybrid cloud infrastructure. Well, at least that box is ticked. And then maybe I can go and build some other cool apps instead of worrying about turning on backup, or if I didn't have it.
That's exactly right. I don't think I've ever met a customer that said to me, like, I want to become a storage expert. I don't think those words have ever been uttered in the history. They just want it to work. They want it to be, easy, and they really want to keep their data safe, right? And so these are all the things that we need to focus on.
Dean, I think you just gave the rest of the folks that were part of the NFS protocol a heart attack.
I want it to be easy, he said.
That's the thing. Nobody needs to read the IETF protocol in order to use it, right? That is like, you want to mount and go, and, please don't make me worry too much about everything.
No, and that's part of the benefits. Let me throw a curveball at you, Dean. As you look out to the future, right? I think we've got a pretty good sense these days, and obviously we're talking through this with this series around data protection. Give us a sense of what the future might look like from a data protection perspective. If you're going to give like some guidance, if you were talking to a fresh new user today to kind of look out to the horizon, what would be some of the things you'd want them to consider as they think about how they're going to evolve their public cloud infrastructure?
Yeah, I think there's a few different things. One sort of lower level item though that I like to think about is availability. What's the intermix of availability and durability and persistence, right? In terms of how they're managing. So, in the sense that there really is a trade-off, and in the cloud, you get services that offer you an SLA of a certain amount of uptime. And so as we move towards that is that also, how does that relate to the amount of data protection I get and the resiliency of the infrastructure, right? So that's just really kind of like sort of bare bones level stuff. But I think as we move forward, we get to a area where we really need to look again back to holistically of the entire system and how we go up and down the stack. And so I think this is something again where Google and cloud can really help by giving that single infrastructure. We can protect the front end of your workloads, using the common tools that we're using ourselves or are protecting many of our customers, right? And so they're ready, they're proven, and they are well integrated, I think is the key, up and down that stack, so that, again, when you get down to the storage aspect in terms of how you're protecting your data, that is only one aspect in terms of the full stack on how, you've prevented, someone doing ransom or all the other bad things that can happen. So I really think this idea of the full stack approach to data protection, is really going to emerge as these services in cloud start to really become really closely integrated, and that, do you really need to worry too much about your storage? Especially you look at Kubernetes, people are just deploying applications and the storage gets automatically created underneath the covers for what they're looking for. And so, as we start moving up and up and up the stack, people are just going to be deploying, again, these types of applications and in these different infrastructures. And they just want it, to be auto secured and auto protected and have all the different types of features based on their requirements, and not have to go, okay, I have to worry about this part. Now I have to worry about this part. And I have to have like meetings across 7 teams, right, to make sure that we're all working in line, because inevitably someone sort of drops the ball in that kind of method. And then that opens up a door, right? So really that full sort of stack approach and allowing the infrastructure, Google and NetApp to really focus on the underlying layers and protecting them is key.
I love that. This is fantastic, Dean. And we could probably talk for another 20 or 30 minutes, but thank you for giving us the 20-ish minutes you've already given us. How can people follow up with you online if they're interested in following up and getting more information from you?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn is typically where I'm trolling around, posting various things that NetApp and Google doing, or among many other things. But so, yeah, that's the best way.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Dean, for joining us today. And Phoebe, I think, the note that we wrapped up there, we're thinking about this from a full stack perspective. When we think about the opportunities that creates, as Dean was talking about, how it moves up the layers there, really provides an opportunity for businesses and IT shops to be more strategic and more innovative, because the rest of the data protection and the other elements to that are part of the automation of this. And again, it just opens up a new window of opportunity.
Yeah, there were really two things in that last kind of answer that Dean gave that I wish I had more time to dive in on. That the first is around that full stack approach, and I think that more and more that makes sense, and that makes sense both in public cloud, cloud native architectures where you have maybe hundreds or thousands of microservices, but also as those architectures start to get adopted on premises as well, and you've got these hybrid cloud environments that have, hopefully pieces that are all contained in an application, but they could be distributed globally. They could be on different infrastructures. So understanding that and being able to protect it as a whole, with things like Astra, which we've just launched, which allow you to kind of see the application, not just, oh, here's the storage, this is how it's protected, but the application. So that was kind of one cool, the takeaway that I was thinking about. And then the other is just about how important it is to partner with Google and being able to go to our customers jointly and say, hey, we understand not just your storage and your infrastructure and your networking challenges, but we can understand your workload challenges. We understand that, and we can help you deliver the best service to your customers. And, we're not caught up in this mess of conflicting or non-integrating pieces. So, yeah. Two good takeaways for me.
Absolutely. And want to encourage folks, follow that link down below if you want to get more information about the relationship between NetApp and Google and the services we're jointly providing together. Phoebe, another wonderful episode. We hope if you've got something out of this, take a look and watch some of the other episodes that we've covered around data protection. Really engaging series and really having fun with this. Thank you so much, Phoebe. This has been awesome.
Thanks, Greg. Looking forward to talking to you on the next one.